So in today's Ashika Island video, I wanted to make my second ever top 5 loadout video for Ashika Island. Basically, I'm going to do the same thing that I did a few months ago, the last time I did a video like this, where I break down and go over 5 different loadouts that I think are the best. And of course, there's going to be 5 secondary weapons and 5 primary weapons. You can mix and match any of these combinations to get a pretty good loadout to use in both Ashika Island and also the main map. Now, I will say a lot of the weapons on this top 5 list are going to be the same ones that were on the last top 5 list. There has been a few weapons that have been introduced, and of course, a few weapons that have been buffed and nerfed that definitely changed the list up just a little bit. I'm going to start my list at number 5 and work my way all the way up to number 1, 5 being the worst top 5 loadout and number 1 being the best top 5 loadout. And of course, if there are any weapons that you guys think should have been listed on this list, feel free to let me know in the comments below. And let's get right on to the top 5 best loadout list for Ashika Island. Starting off with number 5 on this list, I wanted to talk about the TAC 56 assault rifle, and I wanted to pair it with the Hurricane SMG. Now keep in mind that number 5 is the worst out of all 5 loadouts, and I didn't want every SMG just to be the same one, because I'm sure a lot of you guys know what that would be. So I did want to incorporate some of the other lesser good SMGs or secondary options on this list, and the Hurricane was the first one that came to mind. Starting off with the TAC 56, obviously the TAC is for long range in this loadout, and it's one of the easiest to control ARs that's in the entire game of Warzone 2. It has a 60 round magazine, which is very nice, especially in squad based game modes. The reload time is pretty quick as well. And although there are other long range assault rifles that are a little bit better in terms of time to kill than the TAC 56 in Warzone 2, I feel like the TAC 56 is far easier to control than those options that may have a better time to kill. Basically what I'm trying to say is that if you struggle with controlling recoil, or you're a newer player to Warzone 2, I feel like the TAC 56 will definitely be up your alley until you learn recoil patterns in the game, because even though the time to kill on the TAC 56 might not be the best in the game, it is still by far one of the easiest guns to use. And of course, for the SMG on this loadout, the Hurricane, as I mentioned prior, it's a pretty decent LMG that's also easy to control as well, similar to the TAC 56. But one of the things that I really like about the Hurricane SMG that I've mentioned in a few of my Hurricane videos from the past is the fact that you don't have to actually put a magazine attachment on this thing, because it comes with a stock 50 round magazine and it frees up another attachment slot to use for something else. I will say I do get a lot of people commenting on all my Hurricane videos saying that this thing is a hit market machine, and I can kind of agree with that to an extent. I feel as if the time to kill on the Hurricane is actually really good, but there are some moments where it doesn't really seem like your shots are really doing as much damage as they should be. But if you can get over the fact that sometimes your shots might do a little bit less damage or feel like they might do a little bit less damage than they should, then the Hurricane is definitely a very well-rounded SMG to use. Moving on over to number 4 on this list, I wanted to talk about the Kastov 762 assault rifle, and I wanted to pair it with the GS Magna pistols. Now I really wanted to incorporate at least one pistol in this top 5 loadout list. I am aware that there are SMGs that'll be better than most of the pistols in the game, and of course the decision was either between the Akimbo GS Magnas or the X13 autos. In terms of practicality, the X13 autos are probably going to be better than the GS Magnas, but in terms of time to kill and just sheer awesomeness, the GS Magna pistols are absolutely broken. Of course, you do have to get very close to the enemy, especially if you're going to akimbo these things, but these things pack one of the most powerful punches for any secondary in Warzone 2. If you're very close to the enemy, and when I say very close, I mean like 2 to 3 meters or so, you will down an enemy faster than any other gun that's in the game. And of course, it would be a little bit higher on the list if there wasn't other SMGs that would do a similar job, just be more practical. And also the fact that the GS Magna only has a 13 round magazine, limiting you to 26 when you akimbo, which isn't really ideal in game modes like squads or trios, but is definitely all right in solos. GS Magnums are a ton of fun to use and are definitely one of the most broken weapons in the game. It's just very impractical when you're at certain distances. And of course, for the primary weapon on this loadout combination, the Kastov 762 or Warzone's 2 version of the AK-47. A lot of people have made tons and tons of videos on this weapon in the past, and after the RPK was nerfed in season 1, a lot of people moved on to the Kastov 762. And honestly, it makes a lot of sense why a lot of people moved on to this weapon. It's a pretty good AR when you compare it to the other ARs that are in the game. The only real downfall to the 762 is the fact that you can only have a 40 round magazine, and the recoil pattern is a little bit harder than most guns to control. But the time to kill is definitely up there with some of the other long range metas that are in the game, and I definitely feel like if it had a little bit easier to control recoil pattern, a lot more players would run this weapon. But all in all, if you're relatively good at FPS games, the Kastov 762 should be very easy for you to handle. Moving on up to number 3 on the top 5 loadout list, I wanted to talk about the TAC V battle rifle paired with the Vaznav SMG. Now, if you guys are a ranked player or play any ranked play in multiplayer, you're probably well aware of how good the Vaznav is in multiplayer. Did you also know, of course, that it's one of the best SMGs that's in Warzone 2 as well? There's not really many bad things to say about the Vaznav. I'm not really a huge fan of the iron sights, but it's pretty easy to get used to. Recoil pattern is incredibly easy to control as well. 45 round magazine is a great option for SMGs. And I would say like the only real bad thing I feel like for running the Vaznav in Warzone 2 is its lack of damage range. And I'm fully aware that, of course, if you're going to run an SMG, you shouldn't really expect it to have that good of damage range when compared to your AR counterparts. But there are other SMGs that have similar statistics to the Vaznav SMG, but also have a lot more range as well. So you have a lot more possibilities to get more kills in Warzone 2 when using other SMGs that have better damage ranges. Basically, to sum up everything I just said about the Vaznev. Everything about the Vaznev is great other than its damage range. Moving on over to the long range weapon for Loadout 3, which is the TAC V, as I mentioned earlier. Similar to the Castle 762, I feel like once the RPK got nerfed at the end of season 1, a lot of people were looking for new long range weapons to try. And just like the Castle 762, a lot of the more experienced players opted to start using the TAC V. With the TAC V, you're able to equip a 50 round magazine, which is perfect for all base modes in Warzone 2. And in my opinion, I feel like one of the biggest flaws to the TAC V compared to the other weapons that I've already mentioned on this list for long range, I feel like the TAC V is a lot heavier, meaning of course you're gonna have an average like slower ADS speed, slower strafe speed, slower movement speed, etc. But if you can get over the fact that the TAC V is basically a lightweight LMG, this thing packs a very powerful punch, and it's still to this day considered one of the best long range weapons to use in Warzone 2. Just like the 762, I would say if you're good at controlling recoil and are good at FPS games, then the TAC V should be no issue for you. Moving on over to number 2 on the top 5 loadout list, I wanted to talk about the ISO Hemlock paired with the BAS-P submachine gun. Now the BAS-P may come to a shocker to most of you guys because I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the BAS-P being one of those SMGs that they added into Warzone 2 but had no real reason as to why you would actually use the thing. But with the season 3 reloaded update, the BAS-P actually received a substantial buff, just like a lot of other guns in the game, and it's surprisingly a lot better of an SMG to use in Warzone 2 than it once was. With the BAS-P, you're allowed to put a 50 round magazine on the weapon, which is pretty insane for SMGs in Warzone, and it has virtually no recoil whatsoever and a ton of attachments that you can use to increase the speed and mobility of the BAS-P. So when you build it right, you have incredible movement speed paired with a 50 round magazine and a freshly buffed time to kill. Out of all the attributes that weapons have in Warzone 2, the only one that I can find that's necessarily bad about the BAS-P is that I'm not a huge fan of the iron sights, but I've seen a lot of people say that they really like the iron sights, so I guess it's more of like a preference thing when it comes to guns in Warzone 2. And moving on over to the AR of number 2 on the list, the ISO Hemlock. Released at the beginning of season 2, the ISO Hemlock quickly became the top tier meta weapon in Warzone 2 because after the RPK got nerfed, they of course had to add a new gun that would basically take its place. Out of all the guns I've ever used in any Call of Duty or Warzone history to be exact, I have never experienced the feel of having such an easy to use and overpowered weapon when I use the ISO Hemlock. This weapon has literally no recoil. You can build it for no recoil control attachments at all. You can put every attachment that decreases the recoil control on it and it will still have no recoil. The fire rate on it is relatively slow and the damage shot is relatively high, so although it's kind of unforgiving in terms of if you miss or not, you're not going to have to really worry about reloading in the middle of gunfights that much, and the time to kill is statistically one of the best in the entire game. Of course, we have seen some small nerfs to the ISO Hemlock since it was originally released in the Warzone back at the beginning of season 2, but even after those small nerfs, I still feel like the ISO is probably like the second or third best weapon that you can use in the entire game. And last but not least on this top 5 loadout list is the best loadout that I think you can run in Warzone 2 at the moment. A lot of you guys probably aren't going to be very surprised when I announce the 2 weapons that I think are the best, considering I literally just made a video about both of them a few days ago. But the best loadout in my opinion that you can run, especially on Ashika Island in Warzone 2 at the moment, is the Cronin Squall paired with the Lockman Sub. Just like in Warzone 1, the Lockman Sub or the MP5 is by far one of the best SMGs that you can run right now. The mobility on it is fantastic. The ADS speed is very good as well, unless you build it like a dummy. You can equip a 45 round magazine on it, which is ideal for SMGs and squads, and the close range time to kill is one of the best in the entire game. Obviously, there are a few weapons that will outgun this. I believe the GS Magnas that I mentioned earlier in this list will actually outgun or beat a Lockman Sub if you're very, very close to the enemy that's using the Magnas. But other than that, none of the guns, even the ones that I put on this list, really come close in terms of time to kill than the Lockman Sub does. Let me know your guys' opinions in the comments below on the Lockman Sub. Do you guys think it's been too long? Do you guys feel as if we should have had a new SMG meta by now? Let me know in the comments below. And moving on over to the long range meta, or the best long range weapon you can use, the Cronin Squall. Now when the Cronin Squall was originally added into Warzone 1, a lot of people actually weren't running it for some reason, and I'm not really sure why. Recently, a lot of people, especially the ranked players of Warzone 2, have noticed that the single fire Cronin Squall is absolutely busted. But even if you don't switch it to single fire, it's still actually relatively good even in fully automatic version as well. I believe it has a 50 round magazine, and although the recoil pattern on the Cronin Squall was a little bit iffy when compared to other long range weapons, as I've mentioned before, if you are good at controlling recoil or good at FPS games, you can make it work. In terms of time to kill, it statistically has the best long range time to kill in the entire game right now at a lot of distances. Basically what I'm saying by that is that the damage drop off on the Cronin Squall isn't that bad at all, and every attribute realistically with the Cronin Squall is actually really good, other than the fact that it has a weird recoil pattern. And that wraps up my top 5 loadout video for Ashika Island and Warzone 2. Please in the comments below let me know how you guys think I did. This is my second ever time making a video like this. I usually just kind of stick to the gameplay and loadout videos, but some of you guys like the videos where I talk a lot, so please feel free to let me know how I did in the comments below, and also remind me if I forgot any guns that you guys think should have deserved a top 5 spot. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching the video.